We got a whole stack of articles here, all about Peter Mandelson and this ambassadorship. What is it about this whole thing that's got you so fascinated?
Well, from the start, it just feels like a deliberate provocation. I mean, you've got Peter Mandelson. He's like the poster child for everything Trump hates, a globalist, loves China. I mean, he even said cutting trade ties was like the biggest mistake. And of course, he's been incredibly critical of Trump and his policies.
Oh yeah, some of these articles really don't hold back. They're practically accusing Starmer of trying to poke the bear, knowing how Trump reacts to this kind of stuff.
It really does make you wonder about Starmer's judgment. Appointing someone who's called Trump a white nationalist and a racist, even a danger to the world, Trump, this is not going to go over well.
Not to mention the Trump camp is saying Starmer was specifically warned not to appoint Mandelson. They told the UK flat out they didn't want him.
Right. It's almost like Starmer's putting maybe his own party's agenda ahead of like the potential damage to the special relationship.
Speaking of the special relationship, maybe we should explain that a bit for our listener.
Yeah, it's a term that gets thrown around a lot, but it really refers to that close relationship the US and the UK have had, built on shared values, cultural ties, all that. Decades of collaborating on the world stage. Real cornerstone for both countries.
So by appointing Mandelson, someone Trump clearly dislikes, Starmer's basically undermining that whole relationship before it even has a chance.
Exactly. And the fallout from that could be pretty significant.
Yeah, one commentator even called this appointment like a test of the special relationship. But it feels like more than a test, almost like sabotage,
Especially when you consider how quickly and how negatively the Trump camp reacted.
Oh yeah, they did not hold back at all.
No. Chris Lasavita, Trump's campaign coordinator, he went on this whole Twitter rant, called Mandelson a moron, told him to just stay home.
And from what I hear, that tweet was totally authorized by Trump himself. This was not just some staffer going rogue.
Oh yeah, 100%. This is a clear message directly from Trump, and he's offended. And it's deeper than just not liking the guy. It's that ideological clash, Trump's America First agenda against Mandelson's globalist views.
So help our listeners understand this globalist label that keeps coming up. What does it even mean? And why does it set off alarm bells for Trump?
So in this context, a globalist is someone who really believes in international cooperation, free trade, the idea that the world economy is all connected. They often support things like the UN, the European Union.
Which are all things Trump campaigned against.
Exactly. Trump sees them as undermining American sovereignty, putting American interests at risk. And guys like Mandelson, who've worked within those systems, they're part of the problem to him.
So from Trump's point of view, this appointment is a huge insult, a sign that Starmer doesn't take his America First agenda seriously.
Precisely. And that's why this whole thing could escalate way beyond just a diplomatic disagreement. This is about power, ideology, personal animosity, all mixed up together.
Okay, so we've established that Starmer's decision has, to put it lightly, annoyed Trump. But let's talk about Mandelson himself. He's got a, colorful past.
Oh, his Wikipedia page is a wild ride. Resignations, scandals, ties to lobbying firms, even a directorship in a Russian defense company, even after the invasion of Ukraine.
And then there's the whole Epstein connection, which his spokesperson denies, but still. It all kind of paints a picture of someone who's deeply embedded in all the things Trump has built his career on railing against.
It's almost like Starmer picks someone who embodies everything Trump hates on purpose.
Okay, so we've got these personalities, clashing ideologies, past controversies. What happens next? How does this whole thing play out?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah, one article even asked, will Mandelson even be accepted by the U.S.? Could Trump actually, formally reject him?
That would be unheard of. A huge slap in the face to the UK could have serious consequences for the special relationship.
But would it really be out of character for Trump?
I mean, not really. He's broken diplomatic norms before, and he's clearly not afraid to escalate things.
So what are the options here? Does Starmer back down, withdraw the nomination, admit he made a mistake?
That seems unlikely. It would be a huge blow to his authority, make him look weak internationally.
Especially after some in his own party are already calling him a Trump puppet.
Exactly. So it seems more likely he'll try to tough this out, hope it all blows over.
But is that even possible? This feels like it could easily spiral out of control.
Oh, it definitely has that potential, especially if Trump decides to retaliate.
And we all know he's not exactly known for tuning the other cheek.
No, he's not. And he has a lot of ways he could punish Starmer, Mandelson, even the UK as a whole.
Okay, let's dig into that in part 2, because I think that's where things get really interesting and potentially scary.
It's a real-life political thriller unfolding right before our eyes. So we were talking about the potential fallout from Starmer's decision. And, well, Trump isn't exactly known for letting things slide.
No, not at all. And we talk about how this whole thing seems, well, personal. Like Trump sees this as a challenge to him directly.
100%. And that's why retaliation is almost guaranteed. Trump has a history of using his power to go after anyone he sees as an enemy. And he has a lot of tools to do that.
Okay, so let's get specific. How could Trump actually retaliate? How could he make Starmer, Mandelson, and even the whole UK pay for this?
Trade is always a big one. The UK is still trying to get that post-Brexit trade deal with the US. Trump could easily just shut that down, say no deal, as long as Mandelson's the ambassador.
That would be a huge hit to the UK economy, especially with all the uncertainty they're already facing.
Absolutely. It would be a clear signal that the UK isn't a priority anymore. And it could hurt their reputation with other potential trading partners.
What about security and intelligence?
Yeah.
Isn't that supposed to be a core part of the special relationship?
Right, but that's another area where Trump could squeeze them. He could limit intelligence sharing, pull back support for joint military operations, maybe even restrict travel for UK officials.
Yeah, some of these articles suggest Trump could even target Mandelson and Starmer personally.
Oh, definitely. He could try to make their lives as difficult as possible. Remember, Trump has a track record of using legal and financial pressure to go after his opponents.
It's almost like he's playing chess, trying to anticipate Starmer's moves and counter them.
And in this game, the stakes are incredibly high. Not just for them personally, but for the whole relationship between the UK and the US.
It's like you can see the train wreck coming, but you can't do anything to stop it.
It's a scary thought, but it shows just how serious the situation is. Starmer's put the UK in a very vulnerable position.
Let's step back for a second, though. What does this all say about diplomacy now, in the age of Trump? It feels like the old rules don't apply anymore.
You're absolutely right. It really highlights how much personal relationships, individual personalities, have taken over international relations. Trump's always put more stock in personal loyalty, chemistry, than in following traditional diplomatic protocols.
And he's shown he's willing to let his emotions dictate his actions on the world stage.
Exactly. And that makes traditional diplomacy really difficult. You could have these long-standing alliances, carefully negotiated treaties, but if Trump feels personally slighted, all that goes out the window.
So how do you even deal with a leader like that? Can you reason with someone so driven by grudges and impulses?
That's a tough one. Some people think the best way is to appeal to his ego, flatter him, frame things so he feels like he's winning.
But wouldn't that just encourage his worst behavior? Reward him for being a bully?
It's a tough balance. You don't want to give in to a bully, but you also have to find a way to work with him to protect your own interests.
It feels like a no-win situation. You either stand up to him and risk his anger, or you appease him and look weak.
That's the dilemma so many world leaders are facing right now, and there's no easy answer.
So where does that leave the UK? What options do they even have at this point?
Well, we talked about backing down, but that seems unlikely. It would be too damaging for Starmer. But continuing on this path could lead to a full-blown crisis.
So they're stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Exactly. And the longer this goes on, the more damage it'll do.
Let's talk about the impact on the UK itself. How are people reacting to all this?
Public opinion is split, as you expect. Some people are furious with Starmer. They see this as reckless, irresponsible, jeopardizing the relationship with the U.S., all for personal gain.
Yeah, and they probably see Mandelson as the poster boy for everything wrong with politicians. Out of touch, arrogant, more interested in himself than the people.
Exactly. But then there are others who defend Starmer. They say he's trying to make the best of a bad situation. Maybe they think Mandelson, with his experience and connections, is actually the best person to deal with this mess.
So, very polarized situation. And it's only going to get more intense as things develop.
And it reminds us that this isn't just some abstract diplomatic spat. This has real consequences for real people. It affects the UK's economy, its security, its standing in the world.
And it's causing anxiety and uncertainty among the British public, many of whom are already feeling disillusioned with politics.
Absolutely. It's eroding trust in institutions. It makes people feel like the system is rigged against them, and that's dangerous for any democracy.
Okay, we've talked about the UK, but what about the US? How's all of this playing out over there?
Well, the US media is having a field day. It's like a comedy of errors to them. British incompetence, another example of Trump's chaotic foreign policy.
I bet they're loving the drama.
Oh, absolutely. It's political theater at its finest. But beyond the headlines, some American policymakers are actually worried.
Why is that? I thought most Americans were more focused on their own issues.
To some extent, yes. But there are still those who see the UK as a crucial ally, who value this special relationship. They're worried that this will permanently damage that relationship, weaken the transatlantic alliance, especially with all the challenges from Russia and China.
So while some people are enjoying the show, others are genuinely worried about the long-term consequences.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that this isn't just about Trump. Even if he's gone in a few years, the damage to the relationship could be lasting.
It could take years to rebuild trust, repair the damage.
And in the meantime, both countries will be weaker because of it.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground. The potential fallout, public opinion, the implications for diplomacy in the age of Trump. But one thing we haven't really talked about is why. Why did Starmer do this? What was he thinking?
That's the big question, isn't it? And there are a few possible explanations.
Let's hear them. What are some of the theories floating around?
One theory is that Starmer was just naive. He underestimated how vindictive Trump is, thought he could smooth things over with a little diplomacy.
He thought he could reason with Trump, appeal to his better nature.
Exactly. But we've seen that that's a dangerous strategy with someone like Trump.
Okay, so that's one theory. What else?
Another theory is that Starmer is playing a long game. He knows Trump will likely be out of office in a few years. He's positioning the UK for a better relationship with whoever comes next.
So he's sacrificing short-term stability for a potential long-term gain.
Right. He's betting the next U.S. president will be more open to someone like Mandelson, someone who represents that internationalist worldview Trump rejects.
But isn't that a huge gamble?
Yeah.
What if it backfires?
It could. If Trump really retaliates, it could permanently damage the UK's relationship with the U.S. no matter who's president.
So it's a high-stakes gamble with potentially huge consequences.
Absolutely.
Okay. Any other theories about what Starmer's thinking?
Well, some people think this is Starmer sending a message to his own party. Remember, he's getting pressure from some Labor members who think he's too cozy with Trump, too willing to compromise.
So by picking Mandelson, someone Trump hates, he's showing he's not afraid to stand up to him.
Exactly. He's trying to appease his left flank, solidify his position within the party.
So he's playing domestic politics on the world stage.
Right. And that's always risky. Because here, the stakes are much higher than just winning an election.
Right. This is about the future of this special relationship, the UK's place in the world.
Exactly. And those things shouldn't be sacrificed for short-term political gain.
So we've spent the last couple parts really digging into this Mandelson situation. You know, the potential fallout, the political motivations, the impact on both the U.S. and the UK. But I think it's time to kind of zoom out, look at the bigger picture. What are the broader lessons here? What can we learn from all of this?
You know, that's a great point. I think one of the biggest takeaways for me is just how much personal relationships, individual personalities, they really matter in international relations these days, like more than ever before. You know, those old rules of diplomacy, the protocol, the decorum, it's almost like they've gone out the window, especially with someone like Trump.
Yeah, it's like we've gone back to the days of, I don't know, court intrigue or something, where like favors and grudges are driving policy as much as anything else.
Exactly. And that's dangerous, right? It makes the whole international system so much more unpredictable, raises the stakes for everyone, and makes it harder to find common ground, build those lasting alliances.
And it makes it even harder for countries like the UK to figure out how to deal with superpowers like the US.
Oh, absolutely. This whole thing really highlights the challenges for those mid-sized powers, you know, in a world where these big players are calling the shots. They need those relationships, but they also want to be independent, protect their own interests.
It's a tough balancing act.
Yeah.
And it seems like, well, Starmer might have tripped up pretty badly.
Yeah, it does seem that way. Appointing Mandelson when he knew Trump was so against it, it suggests a real lack of, I don't know, maybe awareness, a real miscalculation.
And it makes you question his judgment, his priorities. Is he putting his own political goals ahead of what's best for the country? Is he more worried about keeping certain people in his own party happy than maintaining a good relationship with the U.S.?
Those are questions that are going to keep coming up as this plays out. And they go beyond this one situation, right? It's part of this bigger trend of people losing trust in their leaders, in institutions.
Yeah, when people see decisions like this, decisions that just don't make sense, it feeds into that feeling that the system is rigged, that it's not working for them.
Exactly. And that cynicism can be so damaging to a democracy. It makes it harder to tackle the big problems, the ones at home and the ones on the world stage.
So this Mandelson thing, It's not just about personalities and diplomatic missteps. It's about something much bigger. It's about, like, the health of our political systems and the future of global cooperation.
That's a really good point. I mean, the situation has really shown us those cracks in the foundation of the international order, and it highlights how tough it is to navigate a world where power is in the hands of a few, well, unpredictable people.
It's a little scary, honestly. But it's also a wake-up call. Like, we can't just assume our democracies are going to be fine. We have to stay involved, hold our leaders accountable.
And we have to be willing to have the tough conversations about the problems we face, both at home and abroad. We can't just ignore these complex issues or pretend there are easy answers.
We need to have thoughtful discussions, like the one we're having right now, if we want to find a way forward.
Exactly. And that's why these kinds of platforms are so important. They give us a space to have these informed dialogues, to think critically, to explore different viewpoints.
Okay, well, as we wrap up this deep dive, any final thoughts for our listeners? Something to leave them thinking about.
Yeah. We talked about the potential consequences, the trade wars, the intelligence sharing, all that. But I think the biggest thing to remember is the importance of character, of good judgment in leadership.
Choosing the right people for the job. Thinking about the long-term effects of your decision.
Exactly. Because in a world this interconnected, even decisions that seem small, they can have huge ripple effects, far beyond that initial impact.
Well said. And on that note, we'll leave you to think about those ripple effects. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive. Until next time, stay curious.